Let's hear it. Firehouse Subs. What's going on? Hey, we got podcast number 4 here with 3 guys, local, Wisconsin, Packer, for our Big Ten episode here at Firehouse Subs in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Ron Holstrom, Rich Moran, Don Davey. Let's take it away. Let's go, Richie.
I just want to introduce a distinguished guest, and I consider a distinguished outlier. And I'm being an offensive lineman. We usually don't self-promote, and defensive linemen don't. But I want to self-promote Don Davey here and give you a little bit of a executive summary of his life through quarters. Obviously, we're familiar with quarters in football: first, second, third, and fourth quarter. So I want to introduce Don, first quarter of his life. Okay, the first quarter of his life, birth to 24 and 364 days, 25. He grew up and played football at Lincoln High School from Manitowoc, Wisconsin. And at the high school, his parents made sure that he was consistent with his homework, and he ended up graduating a 4.0 valedictorian from his high school. And not only that, he was recruited by 3 or 4 different schools, Michigan State and Northwestern. He ended up deciding to go to the Badgers. In completion of his first quarter at Wisconsin, where they only won 7 games in 4 years, he ended up being the first guy that was part of the Barry Alvarez team, and he ends up leaving there, and he becomes one of the top 50 Badgers for the Badgers. He ends up being a 4-time GTE All-American, ends up becoming drafted to the Packers in the 3rd round, and he ends up graduating, like I said, academic All-American, ends up being teammates with Ron and I in 1991. So he ended up winding down the first quarter of his life with his fiance, getting married, playing for the Packers, and he set a record because he was one of the first people. He should have been maybe around 40s, because when he was drafted, he ended up being at the Packers draft party within 32 minutes with the whole town of Manitowoc to the Green Bay Packers. And it was a storybook for him, okay, a big deal. And he showed up, and he just always had a presence about him and a demeanor that befriended you, and he ended up being really good friends with Ron and I. We tried to beat him up all the time because he was a defensive lineman. So that kind of summarized his first quarter of life. Second quarter of life, finished up with the Packers, went down to Jacksonville Jaguars, played there, played 9 years while he was a Jacksonville Jaguar. And going fast forward into the second quarter, he went down of his life, 25 to 49. He goes down to Jacksonville, finishes up a 9-year career, and he was busy. He had 5 girls, okay? He has 5 girls, and when he got done playing football, he's bored. And I don't know if you guys, ladies, have your husbands around, but you don't want him around the house. So he's moping around a little bit. And so what he decides to do is take up 2 jobs. He's a Uber driver, takes his daughter to school, and then he goes over to Firehouse Subs, and he spends 8 weeks learning how to make subs and learning the business, because he was interested in getting in the business and he wanted to do his homework, okay? And he was a mechanical engineering major. So he's working 2 jobs, okay? And then he ended up investing and starting in the Firehouse Subs. That's one of the reasons we're here. He went on, got involved with Firehouse Subs. He also has an equity firm. And by the way, he was a little bored. He decided that he needed some competition. So he decides not to run a couple, like Ron and I like to run, but we start off in a slow jog and we taper down. Okay, what does he do? He decides to become an Ironman. He does not 1 or 2, he does 6 Ironman, which is a 26-mile run, 2.4-mile swim, and a 100-mile bike. And he does 6 of them, qualifies for the World Championship in Hawaii at 240 pounds of twisted steel and sex appeal. Okay? You do not do Ironman when you're over 200 pounds, let alone 240. Okay? We're talking driven. 30 hours a week he trains for those when he gets to the end. Besides being a great father, great steward. He's involved with a charity organization, and it's just when you think of Don Davey, he's an outlier. You know, he's always exceeded expectations. But the one thing is, besides him being a mechanical engineer and a mathematician, is there was one thing that I'm not sure if he's an outlier or he's a liar about. And I'll end with this, is he said in this leaving Jacksonville that everybody gets an injury. And as a matter of fact, that is how I ended my career too. This is my knee brace. And Don had a knee injury. And he says eventually everybody gets hurt. But what he can roll into is Ron Holstrom, who I introduced in our first podcast, never missed one football practice, never got hurt, never missed a game. So I wasn't sure when you said that, when you were interviewed, I saw that you eventually get hurt. Ron never got hurt.
He just didn't play long enough.
Yeah, he played 12 years. And I'm telling, ladies and gentlemen, never missed a practice, Ron Holstrom. Okay, so, and now he's in the fourth.
I held out a few times, Rich.
Yep. So you're in the third quarter now, and I just want to promote him a little bit, self-promote, because I think it's warranted. Very special person, great family man. He's with a great company here, and we're going to have him talk about that. And now he's in the third quarter, and let us know about Firehouse Subs, and we'll go from there, Don.
Thanks, Rich. Appreciate it. And thanks to everybody for coming out today. Just flew in this morning. I'm still in Jacksonville when I finished with the Jaguars. Stayed down there. We still have a place up in Manitowoc, so I get up. Every excuse I get to come up to Wisconsin, I do it. So I appreciate you inviting me to come up. It's been quite a run since my NFL career ended. And you guys know this. Like, the NFL is so all-encompassing, right? It's why you live where you live. It's why you train. You have an in-season. You have an off-season. And when I got done playing, probably a lot like you guys, it's like there was a huge void, right? I lost my friends. I lost my job. I lost, there was really we were fine financially. It wasn't like I needed to go get a job, but I needed to do something just to stay active and stay emotionally and physically involved. And so the first thing I started was my investment advisory firm. I started helping some of my NFL buddies with their finances, and that was going really well. But then in the course of doing that, I was helping my NFL buddies find a second career, and franchising was kind of a natural fit for them to get into. Because the thing about franchising is, just like our coach used to hand us a playbook, a good franchisor hands you an operations manual, said, listen, if you follow these guidelines, you probably will be successful. Well, in the course of my research for that, I ran across Firehouse Subs. Firehouse Subs was a company started in Jacksonville about the time I signed there in 1995. I got to know the founders, the owners real well. They started opening these things up around Jacksonville, and by the time I retired, they were starting to franchise. So I started opening these up I fell in love with the company, I fell in love with the food, I fell in love with the people at the company. Our Firehouse Public Safety Foundation, we've given away now over $40 million to first responders around the country. So we own 13 of these in Orlando, and then 6 years ago, we started opening them up in Wisconsin. And now we have 21 of them here in Wisconsin, including this great location here in Oshkosh. So I appreciate everybody coming out and being part of this. The Ironman thing was it's like, okay, I kind of had my professional house in order, but physically, I was going to the gym and I was running a little bit and I was getting in shape, but I just missed competing. By the way, if you ever want to know what it's like to be a defensive tackle in the NFL, you're double teamed. Like I'm having flashbacks here of a double team between these two in practice. It's like sandwiched between these two big monsters.
Don, that's only because we had to kind of gauge you down. This guy went 100 miles an hour like it was game day every practice. So when you're in your 11th, 12th year, you kind of got to take these young guys and say, hey, you need to bring it down. It's a long season.
Yeah, and Ron is right about that, because you're trying to make it through practice. The practice schedules were 3 double days, and you're trying to make it to the game Friday, and the rookies come in, and they try to beat you up, and you're just going, hey, when you're on the way walking out the practice, hey, can you take it easy on tell me today? Beat Ronnie up. And so there was kind of he's trying to look good, but also work within the team concept, and it was a motor that just didn't stop. And, You
By
can tell
the
that.
end of the season, I had them down to where we were character actors.
Well, that was a Big Ten
They just
friendship.
use a lot of hand moves. Just don't hit me. Use a lot of hand moves.
Yeah, it is an interesting dynamic every year in training camp. Of course, now they don't even hit in training
Yeah,
camp.
they don't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally exact opposite of what
But we used to beat the hell out of each other. We were 6 weeks and 2-a-days. We'd go at it. And as a rookie, you're trying to make an impression and trying to earn your spot on the team. But as a 8, 9, 10-year vet like these guys were, their position on the team as a starter was entrenched. They were just trying to survive training camp so they could make it through the season. So we had different goals.
Speaking about beating the hell out of each other, how did you guys do against Iowa this year?
The Badgers. Anybody see that game? The Badgers.
Yeah, that was a close game. That was a close game. But, we want to talk a little bit about the Badgers. I went to Iowa, and, there's plenty of Iowa players in the NFL, like there are Badgers.
You know what Iowa stands for, right?
We don't need to hear it, but
Idiots out walking around.
Yeah, okay. But what Don does not want to tell you is when he was a Badger, they didn't win a lot of games. So what did Wisconsin do? They went and pulled probably 4 or 5 of the staff out of the University of Iowa to turn around the Badger, and Don knows this is a fact. To turn down the Badger program. Barry Alvarez was a linebacker coach when I was at Iowa. He was actually just hired as the linebacker coach. He came out of Mason City, Iowa, and everyone knows Barry's story. So, and then Barry took about I think 5, 6, 7 different coaches with him, and the rest is history. That just refired that program.
Thank you, by the way.
Speaking
Yeah,
of
you're
history,
welcome.
2010, Barry and Don were inducted into the Hall of Fame for Badgers, and Don's recognized as one of the top 50 Badgers in the history. I think he's number 20. He made number 20, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of the Badgers, too, we actually played the Badgers, my San Diego State, 19.
San Diego
Ron.
State Junior
Yeah,
College.
San Diego State, Ron.
Is this leather? Is this
Yeah,
leather?
this is the
This
Helmet.
is actually
Helmet.
Rich's helmet that he wore, which
Well,
I have question about this because there's no way that his giant head fit in this thing.
But we actually played, Ronnie, in 1980, October, we played, I was a freshman, and I come from San Diego, we come to Camp Randall, and there's 80,000 overserved fans, okay? And they're passing them up and down the aisles all the way to the top, and I have never seen a frenzy and more zeal toward a team, and that was one of the wins I think they had against us. But it was my first experience of being at Badger Stadium. I've always been a Badger fan, and it's kind of nice to be here talking about that.
Just back to, when I grew up in Wisconsin, the Badgers weren't very good, hadn't won a lot of games, but I knew I wanted to be a Badger and wanted to play. And in my 4-year career, we only won 7 games, okay? So we were not a good program at the time. Thank God Barry came in. Barry came in my senior year. And from the very first meeting, it was clear that there was a new sheriff in town and there was a new direction. He came from a winning program at Iowa. He was a defense coordinator at a national championship team under Lou Holtz at Notre Dame. And that very first meeting, he came in and he sat down in front of us and very confidently walked in and said, listen, hey, sit up straight in your chairs. If you got an earring in, take it out. If you got a hat on, take it off. I'm Barry Alvarez. I'm your new football coach, and I'm here to win. And in one sentence, changed the trajectory of our program. We didn't win. We only went 1-10 that first season, but he purposely that first offseason weeded out about 25 guys from the team. He beat the hell out of us. 4 a.m. workouts, off-season conditioning. And guys just quit because it was so much harder than what we had been used to before.
You're welcome.
But that's what he wanted, right? He only wanted guys that were willing to put the work in to do it. Because
that's exactly what
he
it was.
knew that we weren't as talented as the other teams in the Big Ten, and the only chance we had to win was to outwork, out-hustle, outsmart the other teams. And then, sure enough, 3 years later, he has them in the Rose Bowl, and hasn't looked back since.
What a lot of people don't understand is how the Big Ten and how the NCAA was set up back then. You didn't have it the way it is today, where you have more competition because of was it Title IX, Title X, whatever it is, where they changed the scholarships on who could have what, and you had your Nebraska, Ohio State, Michigan's, Notre Dame, where they got everybody, anyone that was good in the country, they got them. Once they changed the rulings on what colleges could do, it really opened it up to other schools.
Well, what Barry did too is smart. When he came to Wisconsin, and even before he took the job, He said, listen, he drove around the state and he met with the high school coaches. He said, listen, in this state of Wisconsin, remember Barry played at Nebraska, right? And he said it reminded him just like Nebraska. The one thing I know I can recruit here at Wisconsin is big farm kids to come be an offensive line, right? And we got the weather, we got winter, we're going to be playing games in November in the snow and the sleet. I'm going to build this team around the big guys up front. And you look over the past 25 years, I mean, it's been an offensive line powerhouse. And I'm going to recruit the skill guys from Texas or from New Jersey or from California where I have to. And I'm going to get a quarterback that's just good enough to manage the team. And I'm going to hand the ball off 40 times a game. Yeah. And we're just going to pound and grind people down. And by and large, that's been his MO from the get-go, both as a head coach and as athletic director.
You know what I think the advantage Wisconsin has over a lot of schools is when I played back in college, you had Air Force Academy, you had Georgia Tech and Navy that ran the wishbone, right? And you always had to prepare. It's very rare did you play that offense. Well, now Wisconsin's offense with 2 tight ends and fullbacks and 3 tight ends, all the other teams are running spreads, so they're not used to playing in a playing against offenses that run that offense, and I think that gives them an advantage.
Well, I tell people too, and sincere thanks for sending us Barry. I mean, from the day Barry took that job, I mean, there's not been a more remarkable turnaround in college football history. There's people in this room that remember what I'm talking about.
Iowa, when I got there.
But I'm saying sustainability, right? They were very good for a while and then kind of have had some on and off seasons. I don't think the Badgers have won fewer than 7 games in the last 25 years since Barry's been at the helm.
You know, speaking of remarkable, would you mind introducing your staff that run this franchise here? And God, I'd sure like a sandwich too if we can get one of those.
Guys are getting hungry up here, troops. Let me introduce my partner, Eric Irwin. We own the development rights for the entire state of Wisconsin. Eric runs day-to-day operations for him. Let me just let him give you a little more history about Firehouse Subs.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I, too, am an Iron Man many times over. Can't tell by looking at me, but I am. And first of all, Firehouse Subs was established in 1994 by 2 firefighting brothers, Chris and Robin Sorensen. They have decades and decades of firefighting heritage. We have given back to the community $46 million to date through the Firehouse Subs Public Safety Foundation. And Wisconsin has been number 1 for the last 4 years in the Public Safety Foundation. A lot of that is due to Steve Aarons, the franchisee here at 1890 South Kohler Street in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Give it up to Steve, Lisa, and their team. Woo! Fantastic job. They were number 2 last year out of over 1,200 restaurants. Also, Steve was the franchisee of the year in 2016. So this is a very well-run operation. I suggest everybody come down to 1890 South Kohler Street. If you're in Madison, please go to 2907 University Avenue. There is parking in the rear. That's the newest Firehouse Subs in Madison, so please get there. But anyway, also come in and get a Nashville hot brisket, our newest sandwich, and it is to die for. Thank you so much.
I think the boys are hungry up here. You better bring some food up here before Rich starts kicking me under the table here. Quick story on that $46 million that we've given away. You see the red pickle buckets here. It's a great story. We serve a pickle with every sub here at Firehouse Subs, and those come in the big 5-gallon pickle buckets. We used to throw those away. After we served the pickles, we'd throw the buckets away, and then we'd have contractors and painters and landscapers digging through our trash bins, stealing those because Home Depot would sell the same bucket for $6. And so one of our franchisees got the idea that, hey, why don't we brand them and logo them, paint them red, and we'll let our guests buy them for $3 as a donation. And a big chunk of that $46 million that we've given away has been through the generosity of our guests who have paid $3 for a pickle bucket, and then all that money goes to the foundation. And every penny we raise right here in Oshkosh stays here in Oshkosh. So what I tell people is when you contribute to our Public Safety Foundation, you're doing nothing but keeping yourself and your own family safer, because ultimately all that money's going to end up at your local police department and fire department. So thank you for your generosity.
Don, can you just touch on what they do with the money? I mean, I know it's for equipment, things like that. I mean,
yeah, the founders are true. This is the real deal here. The founders of Firehouse Subs were firefighters, 3rd-generation firefighters. And so that's part of their heritage. That's part of the culture of the company. And so every penny that's raised buys life-saving equipment for underserved police departments or fire departments in the local communities where we do business. So we've got all kinds of great stories. We bought Jaws of Life. We bought fire trucks. We bought bulletproof vests. We bought 25,000 AEDs to put in schools. Hundreds of stories of lives being saved through the generosity of our guests donating to the Public Safety Foundation. It's a pretty cool story.
That's, Ronnie, what do you think about transition, talking to a little bit about the Packers, where they're at also, and maybe after that we got the Badgers, talk to them, and the fantasy football.
I want to touch on that, but one thing Don hasn't told us about,
What's that?
the mention of Manitowoc. Now, you know that's where he's from. That's where he grew up.
Lincoln High School.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if people in Wisconsin know this fact, but Manitowoc has the only submarine base in Wisconsin.
Is that right?
We used to build ships in World War II. That's where the Lincoln ships came from. They built ships and submarines for World War II. And the USS Cobia is still downtown Manitowoc. You can go see it.
So if you get to Manitowoc, go see it.
So when we had our first podcast back in July, there was a lot of discussions about the Packers and the new staff and how Aaron would assimilate. And they were 3-1. I think they lost their fourth of four. And so each month they've only lost one game. I know they recovered last week. But where do you think, Ron, where the Packers are at right now? You know, and if they only lose one game in December, they'd end up 12-4, and just kind of talk a little bit about the Packers. And before we get to the Badgers game.
Well, I think one of the biggest things, they've been developing the whole season.
Right.
You know, they've had a couple setbacks. I mean, pretty hard setbacks. I think you know, just looking at the team and watching them play, you can see that they're much improved over they have been the last few years. You know, part of that's personnel, coaching. I think the defense is coming around. I thought the defense would be a little more stout up front. We're able to win because we're making big plays on defense. Our consistency on defense is what's lacking. But the big plays, they seem to come up with the big plays at the right time. Aaron's having a good year. You know, I think there's some frustration that, you know, people want him to throw every down, you know, down into the end zone. You know, but the reality is, I think everyone's got back in check and got back to playing smart football, and that's what wins. And obviously, at this time of year, it doesn't matter what you've done prior to this. The month of December is what gets you into the playoffs.
Yeah. Kind of like when we played, we always hit the playoffs, huh, Ron? It's a joke. We didn't. Yeah. We were actually.
Our month of December, you were thinking about what it was going to cost you to get your car back to San Diego, how much it was going to be to.
That is true. We played for a gentleman by the name of Forrest Gregg, and Forrest used to get up there, and he had that screeching voice. Vince Lombardi said he was the best football player he coached, and he used to say, "Man, you get paid for a 16-game season, and I do not want to see a bunch of UPS boxes down at the front because you're getting paid, or I'll fire your ass and you won't get paid." I mean, that happened. Yeah, he ended up leaving in '88, but he was very adamant. Focus on your job, and that's what Don's done all the way up to now too. But that was kind of interesting for us on that.
Yeah. We don't have any more West Coast games this year, do we?
No. We need to.
Thank God the Super Bowl's in Miami.
That's why we need to run the gamut here, so we can keep everything in the Midwest.
Speaking of West Coast games and the Badgers, if they win, do you think, Don, they're going to end up in the Rose Bowl, or not?
Badgers win. Now that throws that whole BCS ranking system for that. They'll have a tough time ranking that thing. Obviously, if they win, they got a strong argument for making the Final Four and for playing for a national championship. I think even if they lose to Ohio State, which they won't, but even if they lose to Ohio State and it's a competitive game, I think they'll end up in the Rose Bowl. Right? The Badgers travel really well. We got the best fans in the country. The people, trust me, the people of the Rose Bowl selection committee know that. And if they can get the Badgers some way, somehow, they would much rather have them over a Penn State or somebody like that. So it's going to be exciting. I can't wait for the game tomorrow night. It's going to be really exciting. They beat us up pretty good last time we played Ohio State. It's a complete team from offense, defense, special team that we're going against. But Paul Chris is a good friend of mine, former teammate. He's a brilliant offensive mind and a great leader, and I'm excited to see what he comes up with for that game tomorrow night.
Yeah. What do you think, Ron, on the game?
Well, I think the benefit of the game is that it's tough to beat it's tough to beat a Big Ten team twice in the same year. The Badgers have a little advantage there. Ohio State's, they're tough, but you know what? It's a game that means everything, and the Badgers, they've stepped up in those games. So, I'm a Badger fan because I live in Wisconsin.
Right.
Always an Iowa fan, but when the Badgers are playing, except Iowa, we want the Badgers to win.
Have you seen this Jonathan Taylor play? I mean, he is just unbelievable. I mean, what a blessing he's been to this
Well,
team.
so are those
what he's done, just like the last, he broke Kershaw Walker's record for first 3 years. He'll probably end up going pro next year, so we're not going to be lucky enough to see him play all 4 years. Had he stayed next season, he probably would have shattered every rushing record there is. But, man, he is the complete back. He's big, he's strong, he's powerful, he's fast as hell. He's got great vision, and he's durable too. He's played
catches
for
the ball
3 years.
out of the backfield.
Now he can catch the ball.
And
That's
he
something
seems
new he
humble,
added
too.
to
You
his
hear him
arsenal.
talk on TV. He seems really humble. You touch base, though, about the offensive line and it just seems like they always have good linemen and good tight ends, and it really is a great place to go for a running back.
Wouldn't you want to run behind those guys?
Yeah, it's
Rich, they took that Iowa game plan and put it over into the Badgers.
It really is. Nebraska, that's how they built that program. Iowa, that's how Hayden Fry built that program. Although you had that goofy stand-up tight end you used to do with
I know. Kirk Ferentz was actually my offensive line coach when I was at Iowa. So
Well, it'll be fun. It'll be a fun game tomorrow night. Big Ten championship game for the, sixth time, I think? I think Badger's been there more than anybody in the Big Ten.
I think it's going to be awesome.
Since it started. It's going to be a great game, and hopefully we can pull it out and be fighting for a national championship.
If they win,
Okay.
it's going to screw that whole methodology up on how to have a playoff system. I think what we need to do is touch a little bit of why we're even here.
yeah.
Can we get Vito in here?
Where's
Is
Vito?
Vito
He's
lead?
back eating a sub, I think.
Well, yeah, he's back there looking at his phone because he's had a tough fantasy football. Maybe we could talk a little bit about his fantasy football. Rob.
I don't think he wants to talk about that.
Yeah.
We touched on that earlier in the year, and everything that we touched on happened.
Yeah. Speaking of how we ended up coming to Firehouse Subs is I actually went to San Diego State, and I was sitting out in front of my barbecue in college trying to put on some weight and work out, and because I wasn't naturally as big as Ron, and I actually met a guy at the barbecue named Vito, and Vito works for a gentleman by the name of T.J. Rogers, who's from Oshkosh, and he went and started Cypress Semiconductors and did really well. And so what he's done is he's kind of invested back in the community in Oshkosh, and has started T.J. Highland's steakhouse about 8 months ago, and Vito started that. He also runs his
He's
winery.
from here, right? He grew up in
Yes, he is.
in
He grew up in
Oshkosh?
Oshkosh, went to Oshkosh High School. He's a big donor over there also, very involved in the community like you. And then he also purchased Oshkosh Golf Course over there.
Yeah,
And so-
Oshkosh Country Club. He actually wanted to bring back to the community, invest back into the community. They have a couple restaurants in town. He's also developed his wine, his wine line, and now the bespoken spirits.
So we did our third podcast was actually at the winery in Santa Cruz, where I'm from, Northern California, and it's a Pinot. And so that's how we kind of started the Rich and Ron show, because I knew Ron lived up in Woodruff, up in Minocqua for 25 years. He was really successful in the snowmobile, skidoo business, and kind of got out of that, and we kind of tripped in and rolled into this. And so I kind of saw Don in the Iowa-Wisconsin Badger football game, and we tried to do it that weekend, and we've ended up moving it to this. It actually's come out nice with the Wisconsin Badgers playing, but we did want to talk a little bit about fantasy football, Ron. And how is the fantasy teams doing that Vito is
Well,
part
Vito's
of?
Who's in first place here? What are the standings here?
Yeah, go
Well,
ahead, Ron.
Fill me in.
you're looking at the first place guy right here. Vito is not in the playoffs. That's all. That's all we need to say. This is a guy that's been the manager of his league for 12 years, and we got him in our league this year, and he didn't make the playoffs. So we touched on that earlier, and that's just beating a dead horse. Yeah. So when I get my money, I'll send Vito photos. And let them know how.
Well, I will say, you guys, put yourself in my shoes, okay? To this day, I didn't realize this till a couple years ago. Somebody wrote an article about this, did the research. There's only been 12 kids that were lucky enough to grow up in the state of Wisconsin, get a scholarship for the Badgers, play their college career at Wisconsin, and then be drafted by the Green Bay Packers. And I'm one of those 12 kids, right? And so my whole time at Green Bay, I told you this, Rich, I just felt so blessed and so lucky. Like everybody in this room, you grew up cheering for the Packers, and I was a huge Packer fan as a kid, watched you guys play, and all of a sudden I'm drafted. I'm in the locker room with you guys, and I'm wearing the helmet, and I've got the uniform, and I'm on the field. And I was like a kid in the candy store my whole career. And so even in practice, the idea of a motor and going 100% full time, it's like, listen, I just felt so fortunate to be part of this. They were going to get everything I had, every single practice, every single opportunity I had. I wanted to give as much as I could because I was just so grateful to be part of that. What a great organization.
And we appreciate that, but we don't appreciate that. So, Vito's back now. He just got off the phone with Donald Trump, and he's able to.
Did you get that trade deal done, Vito?
Hey, Vito, we want to talk a little bit about the wine. And
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, don't you have something to say to me about my fantasy team?
you missed it.
You buried me.
I think he's taking.
They already know. They already know that you are not in the playoffs.
I'm in the Turd Bowl.
Yeah, and the 12 years of running the other league was you learned nothing. So.
Thank you. Anyway, that wasn't Donald Trump. It was almost like Donald Trump. It was TJ. He's
Same thing.
Yeah, TJ's coming out tonight, flying in. We got a whiskey fest at TJ's Highlands Steakhouse right off of Ripple, off of the 45, as you're headed to Black Wolf. By the way, the country club and the restaurant are open to the public. So it's a public restaurant, not a private restaurant. Oh, Bespoken. Here's the whiskey. This whiskey is unbelievable. Through technology, 2 doctors and a scientist have created a bourbon whiskey that normally takes 10 years in a barrel, 6 days.
6 days.
It's not a chemical, it's not chemically induced, it's natural processes, but this is a millennial whiskey right here, Bespoken. We're going to have it tonight. We're going to have some old fashions. Anybody know what old fashioned here is?
Born in the state of Wisconsin, you know what an old fashioned is.
Jeez, you guys drink that like protein shakes. Next thing we got is Clos de la Tech, which is our wine, TJ's wine. This is Pinot Noir. It's from Santa Cruz. Rich was at the winery for podcast 3. We missed Ron. We gave him lots of shout outs, but the winery's beautiful. Santa Cruz is south of San Francisco. All estate grown, beautiful wine. All we do is Pinot Noir. So we got steakhouse, we got whiskey, we got wine, we got the podcast, we got football, we got fantasy.
The Christmas spirit.
It's the Christmas spirit. All right, guys. Well, here, anything else?
No, I think you did. We were just worried about you. We didn't know what happened.
Yeah, Donald Trump, T.J. Rogers, a.k.a.
I know.
Had to get on the phone with him. But everybody having fun? I'll give the mic back over to Don and the guys.
What I'd like to do is kind of get Don's opinion of the Packers. You know, because I'm sure, you know, you watch a lot of Jacksonville, so you see a lot of different teams playing them. Watching the Packers, you see the different teams playing them.
Yeah, and one of Don's coaches was Tom Coughlin, who was our coach one year with Forrest Gregg. I think it was '87. So maybe some people want to know a little bit about Tom Coughlin too. I know he was your coach and he's with the front office now. But go ahead, give us.
Yeah, I left. I didn't want to, quite honestly. Back when I played for the Packers, I played here from '91 to '95. And remember back in '95, remember our defensive line back then? I see a Reggie White jersey. We had Reggie White. We had Steve McMichael from the Bears. We had Sean Jones. We had Bryce Popp. We had John Yurkovic. We had Matt Brock. I was a pretty good player, but I was probably the 8th best defensive lineman on that group. And so I was an unrestricted free agent in '95, and the Jaguars were an expansion team, and they had just hired Tom Coughlin from Boston College to be their head coach. And Dick Duran, you remember Dick, our defensive back coach?
Yes, great guy.
Tom's first hire was Dick Duran to be his defensive coordinator. And I remember Dick had hinted that to me. Remember, we made the playoffs that year. We lost to Dallas down in Dallas. And shortly after there, Dick pulled me aside in the locker room and said, hey, listen, I want to talk to you. And he kind of filled me in on what was going on. Anyway, he recruited me to kind of sign as a free agent down to the Jaguars. And the idea of starting a team from scratch was really exciting to me.
Right.
Tom loved my type of player. You guys, I wasn't the most talented guy in the world, but I was a hardworking guy. I was a smart guy. I could play every position. And Tom knew that's how he wanted to build the Jaguars, with guys just like that. We didn't have any superstars on the team, but he signed me as a free agent. We signed Jeff Lageman. He was the other big name free agent we brought down there. But other than that, we built the team through the draft. But yeah, Tom Coughlin, like I say, he had spent some time here in Green Bay, built that team of the Jaguars, kind of a blue-collar guy like myself and a bunch of other guys that we signed like that. And in just our second year, we made it to the AFC Championship game that year. You know, we went to Buffalo. We beat Jim Kelly and Thurman Thomas and those guys in Buffalo, where that was their first home playoff loss in a long time. We went up to Denver and beat John Elway and them in Denver, and then we lost to New England that year in the AFC Championship game in 1997, where we would have played the Packers. That was the year the Packers beat Carolina in the NFC Championship game, and then went on to beat New England in the Super Bowl down in New Orleans.
Yeah, all of us, our timing, you can't control when you're born, but all of us just missed that Super Bowl right there.
Well, what they tell me is that when they got rid of the dead weight like you,
Yes.
me, and Ryan, then they were good enough to go on to the Super Bowl. They replaced us.
Come on, Rich.
But anyway,
you guys know what my Super Bowl was.
What was that?
Lasting 5 head coaches, making it through 5 head coaches.
That is quite honestly, that's phenomenal. Those of you that follow Ronnie's career, you know, every time a new head coach gets hired in the NFL, the first thing they do is purge the roster, right? And just if he's going to win or if he's going to lose, he's going to do it with his own players. To tell you how good Ronnie was and how consistent he was, for him to last through 5 head coaches in the NFL is just phenomenal. I'm not sure there's another player that's ever done that in their entire career. But now, you know, I'm a huge fan of the Badgers. Obviously, I come up for Badger games. I'm a huge fan of the Jaguars. We've got a great alumni group where we go watch games from the sidelines there. But I'm also still a huge Packer fan, and my girls are too. They all have the Packer gear, and they've been brainwashed and come up here for a couple games every season. So I still follow them very closely, and I make my daughter stay up late on Monday Night Football and Sunday night and Thursday nights to watch the Packers play.
Let's talk about your 5 offensive line. You got a perfect 5 girls. Tell the viewers, he has some daughters that are outstanding. Can you
Outstanding
introduce them?
athletes.
Yeah.
Your wife
Like mom, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, your
Do
wife was
they
an
have,
outstanding athlete.
They have great grades like you also?
Yeah, 5. They're great. They're my pride and joy. My oldest is actually graduating next weekend from Northwestern. She's getting her master's from Northwestern right now. Wow. She'll be done with grad school. Hoping to get her to come work for me.
So that's your oldest. What are the
Yeah,
other
she's
4?
number 1. That's Livy. Carly plays volleyball at University of Miami. She's followed her dad's footsteps. She's a mechanical engineer, University of Miami. Got a 4.0 down there. She'll graduate in the spring. And then number 3.
She's a 4.0 in college. She didn't drop from 4.0 to 3.5 like you.
No, she didn't.
Right,
She's got me beat. And my third is she's in her second year at UVA. She's actually going to graduate in 3 years. She's brilliant. And then she wants to go to med school after that. And I still have 2 at home. I have a 16-year-old Chloe and my young one, Casey. Casey is 11 years old. She's my flag football star, basketball star, track star. She would have been a hell of a defensive lineman if she was
I don't
a
know
player.
about Ron, but I'd have got a 4.0, but the guy sitting next to me didn't do his homework.
Looks like you got some food in front of you there, Rich. You hungry?
Excuse me, I was tasting the sandwiches. They're unbelievable. I had that little break there.
I think I hear Ron's stomach rumbling. I think we got to wrap it up.
Yeah,
Rich.
we're
He's
gonna wrap
gonna-
it up here, Rich. So we got the Redskins, then we got the Bears at home,
Right.
and we got a shot. We got a shot at the playoffs. So
We take care of business. We should win the division and
we
get in the second season.
You know,
here.
we got to run the gamut. Is what we got to do.
I feel
So,
comfortable with the 49ers coming here.
Yeah.
On that field, 'cause it slows the D linemen down. It's very advantageous. I think when you look at our schedule, they actually had something on I was reading the other day about the schedules of the Packers is like a 400, 500 average of the teams versus the other teams are playing. So if we can finish up and get home field advantage, that's a big deal.
Listen, I want to finish up one thing. I want to thank everyone here at Firehouse Subs for letting us come in here and mess up their noon hour.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Everything's fantastic. I really appreciate it.
Don,
Great, we
thank you for
appreciate
having
it.
and every.
I want to thank Don for coming. we get to see him once or twice a year, and we're glad that he came in here and did this with us. And looking forward to podcast number 5.
Yep.
So, Don, thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me. Thanks for everyone for coming out. And this was a lot of fun. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.